This episode of Rookie Hunter is brought to you by the Wild Sheep Foundation. Become a member, join the Less Than One Club, and attend their annual convention, Sheep Show, Reno, Nevada in 2020. For more information, go to wildsheepfoundation.org. Hey guys, welcome to episode 118 of Rookie Hunter. It's been a little while and there's a reason for that. I'm currently sitting in the middle of the desert in San Pedro de Atacama in Chile, not far from the border of Argentina and Bolivia, and currently looking at the Andes, which are some of the most stunning mountains I've ever seen. But anyways, Kelly's been busy, and he did an episode for us. Him and our good friend Adam Janke from the Journal of Mountain Hunting got together and had a good chat. One thing I brought along with me to Chile was my Calvin lightweight hoodie. It's one of my favorites. The nights get cool in the desert up here, and I've been wearing that every night, so go check that out. All of our gear is up on our website, as you know, rookiehunter.com. Click on the gear tab. You can have a look at all of our sick gear. Sheep Show's coming up, 2020. Make sure you guys get yourself registered. Become a member. Join the Less Than One Club, wildsheepfoundation.org. You can find all that information there. And of course, North Arm Knives, our longtime knife sponsor. We love those guys. We love their blades. Go check them out, northarmknives.com. Well, let's get into this episode. Sit back, relax, crack a nice cold cerveza, and enjoy episode 118 with Kelly and our good friend Adam Janke.
So Kelly, man, it's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while. I think the last time we did a swap cast was with the BHA boys.
Oh shoot, yeah.
Which was, I don't know, at least a year ago.
Probably a year and a half, because I think it was in May, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which was cool. They were up in Kelowna and we had a good time.
That's right. We did have a good time. I was a little dusty the next day.
Yeah. Well, there you go. It's been a good time, so it's good to catch up. Looking forward to it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're kind of like midway through hunting season, so we got some things to talk about.
Yeah, well, I mean, I haven't seen you since July, I think we determined, right? Was when you popped by with Mike and Bree's dad.
Yeah.
When sort of like a quasi barbecue, few drinks as Nolan was headed north. So it's actually quite symbolic, because Nolan just got back and now you and I are connecting back again, and we're going to do the swap cast. It's been a long time, like you said, since we've done a swap cast, but it's also been a long time since you and I have chatted at all. And there've been some pretty significant changes on your end as far as demands on your time and all that stuff. And that's obviously impacted your hunting season a bit. And I think that's going to be a good launch point for some of the stuff we want to discuss today, which is going to be, a bunch of hunting stories.
Yeah.
But also some thoughts around, I don't know, I guess I would maybe say hunting priorities as life goes on, which, some people might just translate into, Janke, at least you're getting old.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, life's changed for me big time. So, and we haven't even really talked about this on our podcast yet, because Mike's been traveling and he's been a busy guy this fall. But mid-August, we have a new addition to our household. So our son James was born mid-August, and it's been unreal so far. He's about 10 weeks now. So that kind of involved me missing out on the sheep hunt, which I'm more than happy to skip a sheep hunt to have a son, a baby boy. So we're thrilled about that. And I followed along with Mike and Garrett through their whole hunt as they were going, right? Like we had the inReaches going and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of I kept up with that story, and they were like, it almost seemed like they were texting me more from their end, just saying like, how's everything going? How's James doing? So it's really cool. But yeah, I just like stoked to have a future hunting buddy and like somebody to teach how to fish and, how to play guitar and do all that kind of stuff. So
all that stuff,
like sitting there playing guitar with him on the couch. And I mean, he has no idea what's going on right now, but he's kind of getting to the point where he's a little more aware, and I can start showing him all these cool things.
Yeah. Well, and it happens fast, right? They go from these, I remember with our boys, they go from this, completely, reliant on us, kind of blob.
It's amazing how dependent they are.
Yeah. Dependent. Sorry. That's a better word. Yeah. And then all of a sudden they start to figure stuff out, right? It's, don't worry about a coaster, right? If you see on the note of kids, if you took a close look at this table, you would see what the boys have done to this. I mean, it's like every meal is like a Viking meal in here. There's like forks stuck in it, and knives smashed into it.
It's character.
Yeah. Well, it's just rough. It's just that, fancy rough stuff, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, Julia and I have made a very specific, decision to not replace any nice things in the house until the boys are old enough that they will not destroy. I mean, if you look around, there's drywall marks and anyways.
Wait 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. Well, who knows? Maybe it'll get worse, right? Because then we'll be able to leave them at home and go away for something, come back to a torched house or something.
Yeah.
Anyways, I remember you were showing me that video earlier of James, right? And he's just this sort of like twitchy vibrating thing and making these baby sounds, and there's obviously super cute and all that. And then just one day they figure out, wait, I have control of that thing, and that's their arm, right? And then next thing you know, they can sit up and they can look around, and they can see more than, I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's not very far at first, right?
2 feet maybe.
Exactly, right? And sounds start to connect with them, and voices and music and all these sort of things. It's a trip, man. It is a total trip watching a young thing grow up, and like you said, looking forward to having, whether it's a little boy or a little girl, we know lots of people that have both, and introduce them to the outdoor lifestyle and all the other things that they're interested in. It's a special thing, and it's this is the first year for me at least where I don't know if I would say I've felt comfortable. That probably wouldn't be the right way to put it, but where I guess the only way I would put it is I feel my eldest is ready to come out for a hunt. I took both boys up for a little truck hunt like 2 weekends ago.
Yep.
I was driving around up one of the mountains here, and
they're 5 and
almost 6, and 6 at the end of December, and then 3.5, let's call it, right? So I mean, they were literally just in their car seats and driving around, listening to country music on rough back roads, and they had a blast. I had a blast. It was great, and we didn't see any deer or anything like that, but felt ready to have them be a part of that. Hudson has always been interested. Like, I've always talked about it with him, but he's a pretty content kid to play Legos in his room and that sort of stuff. Like, he loves being outside, but he's also just as happy to play inside. And I never want to force things on him or his younger brother Connor. Connor, on the other hand, if you ask, can I go outside, and it's -10, and he'll run out there in bare feet and PJs, right? and then he won't realize for 10 minutes that, it's cold. So he wants to be outside. So obviously, when I say I was hesitant to introduce Hudson, he's now 6, but then I take Connor along at 3.5. There's a bit of a mismatch there. But anyways, that's the reason there. But this is the first year where I felt really, really ready to, that they're ready and I'm ready to bring them out and really give them exposure to this beyond like, hey, here's this meat, and where did that meat come from, and that sort of stuff, right? So
I'm looking forward to that.
It's a special thing. It's a special thing, and it's funny, right? Because I've talked to a few guys on my podcast on Beyond the Kill. To them at least, ironically, about having some envy about their where they live, which a few of them, it's just they travel west for hunts, but the bulk of their hunting throughout the hunting season is whitetails.
Yeah.
Out of tree stands and that sort of stuff, right? And box blinds and these pretty skookum tree stands that a lot of people have set up nowadays, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in all those cases, they were taking their kids out at 3, 4, even 5, and
wow.
the kid sits there and the box blind or something like that, and maybe they've got
I can see box blind for sure. That'd be fun.
Yeah, and they've got a couple of like little toys with them or something like that. Worst case, maybe there's an iPad there for that last half hour where they start to get a little fidgety and you still want to be able to kill a deer, right?
Yeah.
But, I was legitimately envious of that, right? Because so much of the hunting I've devoted my time to is, that backpack or backcountry type stuff. And like I said at the outset here, I don't know if it's age or what, but those sort of hunts are becoming a lot more appealing than they have been for a long, long, long time.
Right. It reminds me of our buddy Mark Hall, who has a podcast now. He was talking about kids and hunting. I think he had an episode dedicated to it, but he was saying, when Curtis and his kids were younger, he's like, I think it's about time where I can take them on a hike in, like a little one. Mm-hmm. So he takes the first few steps off the road and he realized they're already having trouble because the grass was like 2 feet high. So you kind of, and it's like that with anything, I guess. Like it kind of goes back to guitar music for me. Like I've taught lessons and stuff, and you kind of like, you don't realize how far back you were when you started, right? Like you need to really appreciate the first steps, and sometimes we take those for granted. So, but yeah, once the kids are big enough, it'd be awesome to get them out hiking and stuff too. But for me, that's a ways in the future. You're getting pretty close.
Yeah, no, for sure. I've taken Hudson on a few hikes this year, like just in the summer, right?
Yeah.
In spring and summer, I should say. I think the longest one we did was like a 3K loop in Myra, and he did great. Nice. Absolutely great. So yeah, he's definitely getting to that point. I mean, it's that balance, right? Between like, you don't want it to be so hard that they're pushed away from it, right?
Yeah, it's got to be fun.
Yeah, it's got to be fun. They've got to enjoy it, right? And so that's why he and I have been talking a lot lately about taking an afternoon here, an evening, and driving up into one of the the areas we've got around here. We're up in the mountains with old cuts and logging roads, and just picking a spot and sitting, right? Even if we just sit for 30 minutes, which is probably about as much as I can ask, right? Depending on the weather, that's still that first exposure, right? But it's it's been an interesting year for me on that front. I our listeners will know I just came back from a elk hunt in the Kootenays that was amazing, super challenging in a lot of different ways. But it took a lot out of me. So I don't know if I'm just getting old or schedule is just a little bit too hectic these days. Hudson started school this year, so that's been a big adjustment for us. He's doing great, but it just really threw a bit of a grenade in our routine and our schedule. And then I've got this Rosie hunt with Nolan that I leave for on, I should say leave for on Monday, and that's going to be a long hunt. So we're right around the 10-day mark. I think the guys, if they have to, are going to stay in a little bit longer. I just can't carve out more than 10 days right now, which is plenty away from home and work responsibilities and all that stuff. But I'm really looking forward to it. I think I was saying this to you before we keyed up the mics, right? Really looking forward to it, and really happy that Nolan drew this tag, because as you know, and most of our listeners will know, it's not an easy tag to pull. But it's probably the first time I've had like an expedition style hunt coming up where I'm like, there's always a bittersweet element to it, right? It's obviously something you look forward to. You have these goals, and it's gonna be fun. You'll be out in this awesome terrain or whatever. But there's that I'm away from home, and always there's an away from work element to it as well, right? But it's all like, if I were to call it in percentages, it's like 90% excitement and anticipation and et cetera, and 10% like, I feel a little bit bad about being away for a while. This one's probably more like 50-50. Like, I'm looking forward to the hunt, but if we find Nolan a good bull early, I'm going to come out as early as I can, because I want to get back. I want to get home, and I'm really starting to appreciate. And I think I said this when Wardo and I talked about the lessons from our first elk hunt, I'm really starting to appreciate, 3-4 day outings and a bunch of those as opposed to 2 big ones or whatever it might be in a year. And I'm not saying it has to be either or, but I've not done a lot of those shorter ones other than like maybe an overnight for quite a long time. And, living where we do, we're really lucky, right? We can do a really good trip in 3 nights, right? And have a great time and have good chances at some, whatever the animals may be, right?
Yep. Yeah. The whole priority thing, even with James, it made this season much more difficult to get out, obviously. I did manage to get out a couple times. Like Bree's been brought up in a household where her dad hunted all the time, and her birthday is October 7th. And I think he was like out elk hunting almost every year. It's kind of like a norm for her. And I guess that means I'm pretty lucky because she's very understanding. But that's only half of it. The other half is like you said, you're actually out there and you want to be back.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's tough. It's good that I guess that hunting season's kind of like isolated to a couple like main months. So I try to look at it that way and try to prep like all year and just make sure everyone kind of is aware of what's happening, and hopefully it's not too disturbing to the schedules and stuff. But it gets tougher as time goes on, I feel like, until they're old enough to come, right?
Yeah,
but
totally.
it's just responsibilities.
It is a getting old thing, I think, right?
But I like getting out too, just for 1 or 2 days, even day hunts. We're super lucky to live where we are.
Yeah, totally.
So like I feel like I've switched from being like putting a lot of pressure on myself on these day hunts to find something and get something, and I'm in that rookie mode. And this is the first year where I feel like I just go out and I like being out. I like just seeing what I'm going to see, and I don't even care if I see anything. And it's weird because I'm seeing a lot more with that attitude. So I guess there's a tip for folks, is just kind of try to take that pressure off yourself. I mean, on the one hand, I try to analyze everything to death. So I'm like looking at, I'm always looking at articles about like what they're eating and at what time of year, and like what elevation does this tree species start and this one, and I analyze it to death. But I'm trying to get away from like when I'm actually out there putting one foot in front of the other, is trying to just trust my gut, and if I have a thought about like maybe I should hang a left here and go over that ridge, just doing it.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to run into a lot more animals that way.
Yeah, you were sharing a story right before we got the recording going here that I thought was a great example of just that, and so probably worth sharing that. But I think it is that when I hear that sort of thing, right? And I'm sure I've certainly been guilty of that, right? It's when in like skiing and snowboarding, you hear that a lot, right? Is sometimes, well, one, you got to commit, but you also got to find that balance between like being on and committing, but also relaxing, right? Because if you go in stiff and trying too hard, you're not gonna have a good run, right? Or a good line or something like that, right? And I think I agree. Like I think the same thing applies with hunting, right? And Nolan and I have talked about this as well. We used to joke and call Gabbett the super planner, because he would. I mean, the dude would. He is a ninja in terms of like Google Earth and research, and like you're describing, finding articles about like goat densities and population. I'm thinking of one hunt specifically. He finds tools and tricks on Google Earth that I would never even think to find. Of course, that's available to anyone if you're willing to put in the time and the research. But he takes it to that sort of nth degree. Which is great, right? Like that really, I think, helps shorten the learning curve. But there's also that sort of, whether you call it gut or instinctive side of things, of like if you're out hiking somewhere, like, oh, I'm supposed to be going here, but then you see maybe it's a draw or a fold in the terrain that you couldn't really make out on Google Earth. Like that looks. I mean, I don't know how many guys have been in a truck with somewhere or on a trail, and you're like, oh, this feels grousey. Right? Like you can just tell. When you're gonna probably see a grouse, and whatever the percentage would be, a high proportion of the time you end up seeing a grouse, right? And I think as you gain your reps, whatever animal you're after, you start to get a feel for whether it's sheep or deer or moose or elk or whatever, like it just feels like, okay, maybe I need to stop here, slow down here, explore this area a little bit more. When you went in with a different plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of, what you were doing via e-scouting or other research.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think too, when you're just starting out and things aren't working, like you kind of get into this thing, well, like maybe I'll take the opposite approach but no, just like stick with your gut. Cause like there's just something about it. Your instinct is usually right if you stick to it. So you kind of end up doing this loop of like thinking you're not doing things correctly and then coming back to it again.
Yeah.
And then the pressure just leaves and it is what it is. But yeah, I did manage to get out for a couple days and I went up kind of close to home and I scouted out this ridge and decided to go up there, and my buddy Kyle came with me. And I kind of just, we went up this, it was like straight up, and I'm like, there's got to be deer up there because we're the only ones stupid enough to go. Because we're looking for bucks. So in my experience, the bucks tend to be a little bit higher. And, you got to walk through a bunch of does to get to them, I feel like. Yeah, we did this loop. We went up the right side, and the plan was to come back down the left side because the wind was kind of moving that direction. And we came back down, and it was funny because it was kind of the end of the day, and you kind of get to that point in the hunt where it's like, I guess we'll head back down, and you kind of let your guard down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then I see this blue grouse fly up into the tree, and I'm like, I'm gonna see if I can get that grouse. Kyle, hold my gun. So I'm concentrating on this grouse. And so I'm staring kind of immediately in front of us, and Kyle's looking past the tree, and there's 4 bucks standing up. So he pulls me down. We're just laying there kind of scoping these bucks. It was really cool because of the fog. It was super foggy that day, and they were just in the fog line. Yeah. So it was even hard they were 200 yards away, and I couldn't tell like if they're 4-point or not. We just watched them for a while, and it ended up being 2 3-points and 2 3-points and 2 2-points. So that was super cool. And we couldn't take one because it was 4-point season.
Right.
But yeah, it just felt like, we're starting to do things right. Like we're planning things and we're kind of adapting to the moment if things don't feel right. Because sometimes Google Earth kind of messes with you, right?
It lets you down as often as it helps you, I think.
Yeah. You know what I started doing? I use ArcGIS now. Mm-hmm. It's a different app.
Yeah.
And I put the elevation magnifier on like 2 to 2.5, and it actually gives you a real idea of how steep is it really going to be.
Right.
Because, now I've done that a couple times, and I know what I'm getting myself into right up front. So that's been a good help too.
Well, and you're probably the second or third person. I didn't know anything about ArcGIS until this year, and as I was just saying, you're probably the second or third person that's mentioned this to me. And exactly that tip is that magnify the elevation profile, and it gives you a much better idea of what you're dealing with compared to Google Earth.
It's crazy the difference.
Yeah, but it's it's interesting, right? Because it's so easy to like go out, whatever, once, twice, however many, a bunch of times. Especially, and this kind of comes back to what I was saying about more trips, shorter duration than, 1 or 2 big trips a year. Because like it's hunting, it's not killing, as we all know, right? You don't go out and get something every time. Some people do. But for most of us, unless an area like the back of your hand, have been hunting it for years and years and years and years, and know all the little pockets and all the folds, and how the thermals and the wind act. Most days, obviously, you can never say always, right?
Yep.
But you're figuring it out as you go in a lot of cases, right? And so your odds, if we just like map out the number of days of field, you're probably better off spending, more trips, shorter duration, to add up a few more days and say like, look, I can only get a week off work, or, tack a couple of days onto a long weekend to make it a 5-day trip. For some areas, you obviously you're going to want to try to set aside more like 10. But if that's your one, trip of the year, then you're going to spend a bunch of that trip figuring out the area. And, if you don't go back there, you're kind of starting new the next time. Right. And so that, when you say like you can kind of start to white knuckle it, right? Like you get out, you're like, I'm not seeing stuff. I need to try harder or do something different, as opposed to, just spend a bit more time in that spot.
Yeah. Hook in the water.
Yeah. There you go. That's a great way to put it, right? Hook in the water. You can't catch a fish without a hook in the water. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's so good. But it's also funny, just coming back to your comment about, I don't know if you actually said it when we were recording it, but you said it a few minutes back about, you're not sure that you can really call yourself a rookie. I mean, I know you can't call yourself a rookie hunter anymore. I think the first time I came on your podcast after you guys showed me that picture of that elk you guys got as a group, I'm like, I don't know if you guys can call yourselves rookie hunters after that. But
there was an element of just stumbling upon that one, so we kind of still felt we were rookie hunters. But yeah,
well, and full credit to you guys for not making that, to not, puffing out your chest more than you ought to on that one, right? And making it seem like you really knew what you were doing or something like that.
That was a struggle, man.
Well, but that's the other thing, right? Is, the more you're out there, the higher the probabilities of just good old luck kicking in, right?
And that was a good example too of like out there for 6-7 days and just saw absolutely nothing for the first 6 days and then stumbled on that thing. So that's a hook in the water too.
That is a hook in the water for sure.
It's one of those single trips, but in this case, sometimes it's just that extra day and then it works out.
Well, and just kind of peppering hard-earned whatever lessons or observations in here. That's the other side of it, right? I mean, that comes back to that seeing it through, sticking to it, right? Because I'm as guilty of this as anybody. You get late in a trip and nothing's happening. I think about my moose hunt last year, right? We pulled out a day early. And I still think that was probably the right decision from a hunting perspective, but from a, straight up like vacation and enjoyment perspective, we had the most epic weather imaginable in mid-October in a beautiful part of the province, a 24-kilometer long lake that was a mill pond. Like it was a mirror, right? I don't know that I can't think of another time in my life I've seen a lake that big and long that wasn't getting some wind, right? Like it was just the most perfect weather. Now that might have actually been bad for the hunting. We're not sure if it was the weather or, some, what seems to be the norm the past few years, some moose population, either issues or movements where they're moving into new areas and they're not as dense where they once were.
Yep.
I don't know. But we left because we wanted to try and put something in the freezer and came back here and hunted around here locally. But both my buddy Matt and I look back, not Wardo, a different Matt, look back and then be like, why did we leave? I mean, we were getting low on beer, but it was just like, the hunting side of it was a disappointment. But if you want to talk about like just being in a place where there's no cell service and just, relaxation and rejuvenation.
Yeah. No work.
No work. I mean, we were in heaven on earth, right? Yeah. The one mistake, and I can't remember if I think we talked about it after that trip, but what would have made that different, speaking of hook in the water, is we didn't bring fishing rods. And we saw, I don't know how many different schools of football fat rainbows.
Nice.
Either at like some creek outlets or we had to run this river a few times in there. And if we'd had those, we would have just, put a hook in the water every day, had a gun over our shoulder and done some moose calling and still would have had a grand old time, right? And
I always bring my fishing rod now. Like when we did our moose hunt, we had a couple canoes and this was central BC.
Oh, last year.
Yeah, last year. Yeah. And I brought a fishing rod and at one point after we came back a little earlier for a hunt that day, I took off in the canoe by myself and I was like, I wonder if I'll try the spoon. So I hooked a lure in there. And within like 10 seconds, boom, fish. Threw it out there again, bite. Threw it out there again, bite. Threw it out there again, fish. So that was my limit.
Right.
But I brought those back and we had a good dinner. And that was a good time.
And that's a great trip, right? Like that. That's, I mean, of course you go out and, whether it's moose or elk or deer or sheep, goats, whatever. I mean, you go out wanting to get something. And of course, like there is an element of disappointment when you don't. But if you can, make the most of it, right? And I think that's, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say for me, one of my, not observations, but where I've landed is, the every trip's a good trip, and I've felt that way for a long time, but don't get too caught up in the outcome because there's a lot of that's out of your control. Control what you can. A lot of it's out of your control. Animal behavior, weather, that sort of stuff. Just make sure, even if it adds a few extra pounds to your pack, that you've got stuff with you that that ensures you're going to have a good time regardless.
Yep.
And then the other thing is not every hunt has to be, a super intense hunt either, right?
Yeah.
It's, I went out last week and got a whitetail doe, and I haven't shot a whitetail and I'd have to really think on that. Have I even shot one in BC? No, I haven't shot a whitetail since I left Ontario.
Really?
So I've been on a few whitetail hunts with guys that had, in particular, a few times they were draw tags back before they just opened everything up on whitetails, especially for either sex, right? But it was, not too long of a drive from here to an area that holds good whitetails, and it's nothing fancy. We were crawling roads, logging roads, right? Back roads. And actually there's maybe not a decent story, but it should have been Mordo's doe, but that didn't happen for some reasons, which I can unpack if we want to. Things happen. If we want to spend some time on that. But yeah, anyways, I ended up shooting this doe and threw her in the truck and, cut her up that night and had fresh tenderloins in the pan at a, rec site with a picnic table. Like this was the furthest thing from a hardcore hunt, but I had an absolute blast. Like it was great. And it was a rejuvenating hunt. I mean, it wasn't a long one, just an overnight, but it was a rejuvenating hunt. And it's really put that top of mind for me, is going for, a big one once a year. That's probably going to be something I want to do for a while. But outside of that, especially with the kids in the mix, right? And the boys in the mix and wanting to take them out, devoting a lot more time to that stuff is looking really, really appealing these days.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we went moose hunting this fall too, and similar thing. I was out for 4 days, and then on the last day, Garrett brought his son up. So his wife and his son came up.
Cool.
So he did a bit of a bit of truck hunting with the son and his wife. And I said, well, you guys do that, focus on that. And I'm not going to be the fourth wheel in the back as much. It would be fun, but I thought, well, maybe I'll head back a day early then. So I came back and went out for a day hunt the next day, and I had an LEH doe tag. So I went up solo, and plan worked out exactly as thought, because I train in this area all the time. So the does were right where I thought they'd be. Doe hunt is much easier than a buck hunt, but it is what it is. And this tag was limited to 700 meters. So you couldn't go above 700 meters. These are basically the deer that are bordering town. So yeah, that was really cool. Got some meat in the freezer. That takes some pressure off.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Kind of like your whitetail.
Yep.
But yeah, I don't know, man. It's great getting a buck, but it's really nice having some meat in the freezer. And the doe meat, we got a doe, whitetail doe a couple of years ago. Actually, it was the elk hunt.
Oh yeah,
the day before that we got the elk, and I think that whitetail doe is the best meat we've ever had.
Man, yeah. So I mean, as I was saying earlier, we had the tenderloins that night, and it tasted amazing. But as you also know, that first cut of meat you put in a pan or on a hot rock on a fire in the backcountry, because of everything that went into that, often tastes amazing, right? Then you get it home, you're like, it's good, but there might be some gaminess or some chewiness or whatever to it, right? But that doe. So the tenderloins were incredible. Came home. Chopped up one of the back straps for Matt and I, because he's going to get half of it. And just did medallions in the pan Friday night with the family. And man, it just, I've not had a piece of meat that good in a long time.
Yep.
And, we're lucky. I guess the hardcore mule deer people might say we're unlucky, but we're lucky in that, whitetails are, from everything I've heard, on the rise. By and large. And because I don't know if they would be labeled invasive, but there's liberal seasons, like this is what I'm trying to say, right? On whitetails,
Yeah, they do well.
They do well, and they like, as everyone knows, if you know anything about whitetails, they do well just about everywhere. As Ranella will often say, there's more whitetails in North America now than when Columbus landed, right? So they're doing well, and because they're not considered an animal that, or a species that needs any form of, sort of restriction or protection in BC, we get some pretty good seasons on whitetails here. Really long buck season.
Yep.
Which is crazy long. And do you remember exactly? Because there'll be the bow season, right? First week of September 1st to 9th, there'll be a bow season for bucks.
Yep.
And then there's one in December.
And then it goes all the way to December 20th.
20th, yeah.
Right? So we're September, October, November, almost 4 months we can hunt whitetails.
Yep.
Right? And then that 10-day block where we can hunt does, which is when we were out. But I'm going to set aside some time for that as much as I can every year, because the meat's just to die for. And I've heard that from a lot of, it was surprising to me. I was actually sharing this with Wardo when we were driving around, when we got the doe. It was really surprising to me when I first moved here from Ontario. Like, I grew up hunting whitetails, and as I met more and more hunters, a lot of them would be like, yeah, man, I got to put a whitetail in the freezer this year because it's the best meat. And it was the only wild game. I mean, I had some exposure to moose. I didn't personally do a ton of moose hunting growing up, but I'd had the opportunity to have some moose and stuff, and frankly, don't really remember that taste, but I had a lot of whitetail. So it's like anything, you kind of take it for granted, right?
Yep.
And then coming from the East, moving out here, I'm thinking like, why in the hell would you want to hunt whitetails? You got sheep and goats and moose and boo and elk and bears and muleys. And like, to me, it'd be like, whitetails are bottom of that list, right? But time and time again, often a guy would say like, no, I always put some time into whitetails because that meat is just the best. And as I was saying a few minutes back, I'd been out on a couple with a buddy who had, at the time were LEH tags for whitetail does. And we had some success, and I don't know if it was because that wasn't too long after I'd moved from Ontario, so I don't know if I was still in that sort of, just shrug of the shoulders, it's just whitetail meat or whatever, but not had whitetail for a long time now, and I've been texting with Nolan and a few other people, like, whitetails are back in my life, without a doubt.
Yeah, Bree's dad has said multiple times, I asked him, what's your favorite animal to hunt? And he's hunted, caribou and goats, and I think he's been on sheep hunt. I don't think he's got one. But yeah, deer, muley, everything. It's antler sheds full of antlers, right? And he's like, whitetail, 100%.
Wow.
And I mean, I'm sure a lot of that has to do with the meat, but I also think like as you get older, you just appreciate sitting there and kind of listening to everything. And I mean, I don't know, I've kind of noticed that with mule deer hunting too, is usually I'm like trucking along and I'm always making noise and I'm just hoping to run into things. But I started like just standing still once in a while, even for like 15 minutes, 20 minutes straight. And you notice like things are really quiet and then they all start moving again. They forget about you, right? Yeah. So I kind of feel like with whitetail hunting, that's probably what you get, is that, that nature kind of forgets you're sitting there and it just starts moving again. Yeah, totally. Which is kind of cool. He's had like cougars walk under his stand and bear and, squirrels beside him. And yeah, it's just cool. The one thing with whitetail hunting though, is it's much more like, and I think this is why Mike and I haven't done a lot of it, is it's very mental. You're like battling yourself just sitting there. A lot of times it's late season, so you're super cold. And you're just standing still. So there's an element of that gets tough. When we first started hunting, we were concentrating on whitetail to start with. And I remember calling in this deer, which was very end of the day. So I had completely let my guard down. I didn't have my rifle on me. It was leaned up against the stand. All of a sudden I see out of the corner of my eye, this like silver whitetail. It had, I think, 3 points. Really nice whitetail walking up the side, kind of his eye on us, right? This was only like 50 yards away. So as soon as I saw it, I kind of like panicked and reached for my rifle. As soon as I did that, he was gone. Gonzo, yeah. But that was really cool. So I'd like to go back there and see if we can make that happen. But don't be afraid to write that spot down before you leave. Yeah. Oh, I still remember where it was. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool. It would be cool to down that buck too. I've never got a whitetail buck before.
Yeah.
It's just been the one whitetail doe, and they're just really hard to hunt. Muleys aren't easy, but I feel like they're easier than whitetail.
They give you a little bit more, I guess, of a grace period. And look, I've never killed a big muley buck, so I can't say that, I know what it's like to do that. But I've killed a few since moving to BC, and they'll give you a shot whereas a whitetail won't, right? Like you'll get that like look at you, like when they first see you, or the classic double hop stop, right? Which I remember that so well. Like one of the first things some guy told me, like if you bust a muley, don't be like, oh shoot, they're gone, because it's not a whitetail, and whitetail's going to be gone probably. That muley's going to go 1, 2, maybe 3 hops, going to stop and turn, and it's going to oftentimes give you a great shot, right?
Yeah, like sometimes that's a good strategy. I actually got out on September 1st for a day hunt too.
Oh, nice.
And that was bow. So I've never gotten anything with my bow. So I thought, maybe I can get out for just a morning, right? Like James was only 2 weeks old at this point. So I got Bree was.
Speaking of priorities.
Yeah. So Bree's like, it's September 1st. You can go out for the morning. So I went out there, and I'm traipsing through this. Like, I think I talked about this on our podcast, but I'm traipsing through this horse trail, and the bushes are all over my head. I'm getting soaked, and it sounds like a stampede all of a sudden. So I kind of peek through the bush, hop through the first layer so I can see. And there's a group of like 6 muleys there, and 2 points, and they're still in velvet.
Cool.
It was like super early. So I'm like fumbling for my rangefinder. I grab it. Like, they're 35 yards. I'm like, oh, this is doable. Like, I'd prefer 30. And just like, still inexperienced as a bow hunter altogether, I end up launching an arrow right over his back. As soon as they heard that, they all took off. And I tried to loop around and catch up, but I ended up only catching up with the last deer. Like the rest of them had passed. So that was really cool too. But strategy wise, I started thinking, with muleys, you can almost traipse through the bush, spook them out, and they'll still give you a shot, especially with the rifle.
Oh, with the rifle, yeah. I mean, obviously not every time, but in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
A lot of cases.
Especially early season like that. So I started doing that a little bit lately too, but it definitely is much cooler when you can spot and stalk a muley.
Yeah, and like, don't get me wrong, from my perspective, I still love a mountain hunt and backpacking in and being up above tree line and all that sort of stuff. But, I was texting with a buddy yesterday about this, and what I think is part of it, and admittedly, again, it may just be a bit of getting old here. Well, as per what you said about, Randy, right? And I think that's, just as a quick little side note, I do think that's a big part of it. Is I think as you get older, you appreciate the stillness.
Yeah.
Right. And you either have the patience, or you appreciate the fact that, you know what, I can just gear down, and maybe you nap half the day, right? But like, they're like, what I was saying, coming back to my text string with my buddy, I was saying, like, you can't go full intensity all the time. Like, you eventually, you're either going to burn out, or you're going to need a bit of a break or a rest.
You get smarter.
And this is it. Like, it's John Barklow was from Sick, has been on the podcast a few times, and I've referenced this a couple times, but I'm not sure if I'm getting it right, but it's it's easy being hard, it's hard being smart, right? Or something to that effect.
Yeah, exactly. That's good.
And I think like that is one of the things with whitetails is there's no question, when I first moved here, like the thought of freezing my ass off in another tree stand after doing that for as many years as it wasn't that appealing. I was excited to, get up into the high stuff and hike around and glass and call and do like that dyed in the wool, mountain western type stuff. Right. And that's not going away, but, the thought of going from, busy home life, busy work life to like full intensity hunt. It took me like almost easily over a week to really recover from that Kootenai elk hunt.
Well, yeah, you said you're doing like 3,000 vertical every day. And
Yeah, I think the lowest, I don't know for sure, but one of the guys had a watch that was tracking everything. And I think the lowest day would have been around 2,500 feet of vert, which isn't huge, right? But, when it's trailless terrain and steep that with a pack on, that gets to you, right? And we had a lot of days that were 3, 4. I mean, the average was probably 3 to 4. And there's a few days we were easily doing 5 or 6. And those are big days.
Yeah.
And it's not that that's like not doable for a lot of people, but if you go into that, pretty tired and run down with, the busyness of life, it can take a lot out of you, right? Whereas, I mean, maybe it sounds odd, but that sort of recuperation of standing or sitting in a tree stand and just, waiting for a whitetail to come out. Yeah, just super, super appealing. And I feel like at this point in my life, that's something, I'm not trying to get all philosophical here, but that's something that I need that more than another intense mountain hunt as I'm about to leave on one in 3 days. But point is, like, in previous years, I guess the summer years, in previous years, I'd absolutely, if someone was like, hey, let's go out and look for whitetails or something like that, be like, yeah, maybe, sure, right? But now it's like, I'm looking to, the late season of this year and then next year and saying, like, I'll cut back on a bigger hunt to set aside, maybe 2 days here, 3 or 4 days there to go and chase whitetails. Cause it's just, it just feels like it'd be a little bit more recuperative and just a nice antidote to, the fact that, we got our phones, we got emails, we got all this stuff, right? And not that you don't escape that in the mountains, but you're going hard in the mountains, right?
Yeah.
And it's nice to go and just be still.
Yeah. Well, we should go up to the spot where I called in that buck. Maybe he's like 5 or 7 years old now.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I don't know how old a 3-point. Is that just 3 years? Three point?
I don't know.
I don't know how that works.
That was one part of whitetail hunting I didn't really.
Yeah.
I mean, I was young enough back then that other than not, I want a big buck. Well, most years it was any deer, within the bounds of what was legal. But, like any young kid that was, reasonably new to hunting, it was like big bucks. And I didn't really, I mean, the internet wasn't what it was back then either.
Yeah.
Dating myself, obviously. But that's the interesting thing. Like, I picked up a whitetail magazine the other day just because I'm on this whitetail, fever now. And reading like some of the stories and how people get into it, like I mean, and I got buddies I have buddies, as I said, that hunt whitetails in the US, especially quite a bit. And some people back in Ontario too. But that's a planning and organization thing, right? Like that's taken details to the nth degree. And, I don't know if people listening to this will have watched it, but Sitka probably about 2 weeks ago released, a little short about a guy out of the Edmonton area. His name's Jim Hull. And it's a little clip about how he approaches whitetail hunting in an area that's known for really big whitetails, Edmonton Bosom. And, that shows him like putting hockey tape on every piece of, tree stand or bow, or like even like your bino harness with like a little buckle taping over all. So there's nothing that'll like little clicks or, little bangs on the tree stand. Like, and, I've hunted with Bert Soren from Sorenex down in South Carolina once for whitetails, and just looking at like, they've got these boards almost like a military operation of like aerial photography and stand locations and buck sightings and wind direction. Like it's, on the one hand,
it's like a playbook.
Yeah. On the one hand, you're kind of like, man, that in a way feels like it. I remember at the time when I was there, I was like, it kind of feels like it's taken some of that, like that gut instinct fun out of it. But at the same time, like it's kind of like, that Zen focus side of things, right? It's none of the other, not BS of life, but the busyness of life.
Yeah. You're putting together that puzzle.
Yeah.
So that's rewarding too, though, when that comes together. Yeah. Like that's pretty cool. I guess we're doing the same thing like daily on a mountain hunt, but like to do it over a span of like X amount of years and actually have it work out, that's pretty cool too.
Oh, for sure. Well, and let's be honest, like on a mountain hunt, you're going to go in with as much of that stuff prepped as possible. But if you're going somewhere new, if it's a fly-in hunt, a horse-in hunt, a hike-in, I mean, whatever, however you get in there, there's only so much you can glean from Google Earth or ArcGIS or whatever.
Yep.
Only so much you can glean from forums and biologist reports and harvest statistics and all that sort of stuff. You still got to get in there and figure it out. And, especially if we're talking about animals that involve a lot of glassing, like,
Yep.
You're going to try to glass the right spots, but you're also going to be opportunistic in that, if you see something in a spot you didn't expect it, you're going to go after it, right?
For sure.
And whereas with whitetail, because a lot of it is stand based, you're maybe not controlling, but you're working the chessboard a lot more intentionally, I think, than most mountain hunting in most cases.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a segue into turkey hunting too, because I would say that's a relatively easy hunt, but it's one of those things where it's all about the details, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's about the calling and setting up your stand and finding a good spot to sit and being patient and not being visible. And I'm starting to really enjoy turkey hunting too. And I've got some meat in the freezer from a hunt that we just did. We were actually going back for, we had a couple baby showers. So one of them was over Thanksgiving when we went back to trail in the Kootenays. And it was the morning that Bree went out to this baby shower. And I had not planned any form of hunt, but I think that her dad kind of surprised me a bit with it. And Bree probably already knew that he was going to ask. So I was totally game for that. I didn't have any gear or anything. He's just like, I'll use all my old stuff.
Sure.
So we went out there and we've gone to this place a couple times. This is actually the third time I've tried to get a turkey with him. And he's a great hunter. It just, the one time I actually messed up a shot, and the second time we didn't get an opportunity. I think they pegged us. I saw this turkey neck poke up behind a rock, and
cool.
This was early, and I'm sure he pegged us at that point, and we ended up spending like 2 hours calling there. And they were just calling in circles all around us. So that was cool. And then this time we started hiking up, same type of thing, going up the road and kind of getting to the spot where we wanted to set up these decoys and start our calling. And there's kind of like this spur road that went off to the side there. And we knew where the roosting trees were. And we can kind of see like down the spur road where the roosting tree is, there's already like a dozen or more turkeys around it on the ground. So immediately the hunt changed from we're going to set up these decoys to a spot and stock turkey hunt, because where we were going, you could actually get above them, which is kind of an odd situation for turkey hunting. And we knew there was nobody else in the area, so we weren't too concerned about, getting on top of other turkey hunters. But we ended up going up above them and had the shotguns, and we ended up getting 2 of them. So it was awesome. like a dual shot type of situation. And one of them was 10-inch beard. The other one was 9.5-inch beard with like 1.25 inch spurs, like decent turkeys.
Oh yeah. Well, you sent me the pictures, right? And they were big toms, man. Like
over 20 pounds, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So that was a super cool experience, and like definitely not how you'd expect to get a turkey, but it was kind of like mule deer hunting, but with turkeys.
It's like a cool blend of like turkey hunting, and which is tough, I know.
Yeah.
But with a little bit of like mule deer mountain hunting mixed in, right?
Yeah.
Like,
we were literally on our hands and knees with shotguns.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Like we were crawling to the edge of this little area, and we managed to get up and kind of hide ourselves and positioned ourselves, and just boom, boom, 2 turkeys down.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
That was really cool. Because they can peg you in no time. So sometimes making that 15-foot crawl takes like a half an hour.
Right.
So we just didn't want to mess it up, and we took our time, and
old school camo and all, right? I get,
which I actually think that helped too. Like the gear we have is unreal. The Sitka stuff and this and I know they have they got the whitetail stuff too, which is but this is all like fleecy, super, like no sound or nothing, right? So I think that helped us in that situation. The fleecy overalls and all that.
Yeah. Well, and Noel and I were talking about this on the last podcast we released. Like we were talking about this relative to the Roosevelt elk hunt, and some of my observations from our Kootenay elk hunt is that, just because you have mountain hunting or backpack hunting gear, which is usually really good gear, right?
Yeah.
Highest end fabrics you can afford and good optics, like all this stuff, right? We all know what you're supposed to invest your time and money in when it comes to gear, or not necessarily what you're supposed to, but it helps in most cases. And yes, there's going to be listeners who be like, I've killed a sheep in jeans and cowboy boots. And you know what? I wish I could have been there with you and wearing the same, because I'd love to do it sometime.
Yeah.
And
Nolan, that's a cool picture too.
Nolan actually, did we talk about it on that podcast? Because we had to redo that podcast. I actually don't know if we talked about it, but he sent me a couple of pictures when he first got back to service of I think it was a goat. Pretty sure it was a goat he guided wearing jeans, jeans and his hiking boots and some gaiters.
Yeah.
So obviously it can be done. But also, obviously, if you're out there for prolonged periods in gnarly weather, better gear is nice to have.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that's the best gear for another species, right? Like think about like a hard shell, 3-layer, like rain shell, pants or jacket, like drawn back a bow in late season on whitetail.
Yeah, not going to happen.
Probably not going to happen, right? Turkey's another great example, right? And I don't know, it's just, maybe it's, not just age, but a bit of nostalgia. But thinking back on some of that old gear, I saw a piece, might have even been on Cabela's, from a well-known brand, but it was that old school, like just bark real tree camo. And it took like all of my willpower to not buy it just out of nostalgia. Cause I used to have a pair of cotton coveralls, like legitimate coveralls, like to go over whatever I would wear underneath. That was that exact same like bark real tree. Like, I mean, that might even be like a real tree version 1 or whatever that I wore for a bunch of my bow hunting for whitetails as a teenager. And yeah, it's just, I don't know. I think there's, that sort of stuff in particular, like, yeah, you can get fancy with your gear in that world or in the turkey world or whatever. But I think it's good to hunt different species and see how the different things, obviously work. I mean, it's an obvious statement, I guess, but it's good to remember that it's not always about one class of gear. Like, fleece and maybe even sometimes cotton might be a great call for certain things.
Yeah, especially day hunt. Yeah, I think after going through that experience, I'm definitely going to look into getting another set of gear. And like you say, it doesn't have to be like, it could be old school, real tree camo or whatever, but I'd like to get some fleecy overalls, and just, something like that, even for whitetail.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm going to look into that for sure.
Well, and that's, coming back to that Sitka video I was mentioning with that Jim Hole guy. And you look at that whitetail system from Sitka, and it's obviously drawing on a lot of those more classic materials, like, really lofty fleeces and those sort of things mixed in with other high end membranes and that sort of stuff. Right.
Yep.
But, it's, an obvious one again, but, it's one thing to go out. Well, this is actually not true because of the weather that Mike ran into on the sheep hunt. Right.
Yeah.
But you can go out in August and expect to predominantly run into rain. And if you're going into northern BC, you should always be ready for snow, obviously, but it's one thing to be ready for rain, but if you're hunting late season stuff, like even if it snows, you're probably not going to get that wet. I mean, if we're talking the coast, that's going to be wet snow. But if you're talking the interior of BC, if it snows, it's probably going to be reasonably dry. And, you don't need a loud and high end membrane in those environments typically. Right. And so, yeah, I mean, it's been a cool year in that regard for me in that season thus far, I should say. In that it's kind of brought me back to my roots a bit and kind of refocused my priorities going forward. I mean, mountain stuff will fit in some way, somehow, maybe not every year, but most years, I would assume every year going forward. But, life and other priorities do supersede, a gnarly backpack hunt. And I mean, the summary is what I said at the beginning, is the idea of shorter trips, but more trips, but shorter trips is, with where I'm at in life with family and work responsibilities is looking like a much smarter, coming back to hard versus smart, right? Much smarter way to approach things. And, it's been, I mean, frankly, all of my success this year has been within a 2-hour radius of home, right?
Yep.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
And same for you.
Same basically with me.
I mean, trails a little bit further away, obviously, but the doe and,
Yep.
I mean, we got to give you at least some credit. Shoot, frankly, most of the credit on my first bear this year, right? Because that was your spot.
That was we were just talking about that actually.
Talk about the playbook, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that well, I think you mentioned it on your podcast too, but like there was an element of almost unclimactic.
And there was almost anticlimactic.
Yeah, exactly. And like not to downplay a successful hunt or like the harvesting of an animal.
Or diminish, the importance of
exactly
taking an animal. Yeah.
But like the way it was done, like the tools, like to use a boat and to still have it be a hike in, like not the furthest one, but I think it still must have been 2 or 3K.
Oh, I think it's a good 90-minute hike minimum.
Yeah, exactly.
So, probably 2-3K. Yeah.
But I guess the only difference being that, we had a plan. We kind of knew a bowl where a bear was, and then we only had to wait literally like 15 minutes, maybe.
I don't remember. It might have been a little bit longer than that, but not much. Like we weren't sitting that long. Like there was no more than half an hour for sure. You're right.
And then, but it was cool that it just appeared out of nowhere.
Uh-huh.
It was like bowl, meadow. All of a sudden, big black thing stood up.
Came out of the fold in the terrain. Yeah.
So that was cool.
No, that was super cool. And obviously, I'll shame myself publicly here because you finally got some of the fruits of that labor, right? But your spot, you helped back it out in the dark, and then despite the fact we live like 3 minutes from each other.
Yeah.
As we said at the beginning here, I haven't seen it. We haven't seen each other in a long time, and I had mentally set aside a bunch of that bear meat to you and Kelly, but you guys were over in July, forgot to give you some, and then bear meat sitting in your freezer, you're gonna eat it. So luckily I was able to get you some of it, but I definitely didn't give you as much as I should have, given the spot and the pack out.
Well, it's all good. I actually still have a little bit of my own bear left.
Oh, really?
I was saving some sausage for more like taking it on hunts and like using it as camp food and stuff like that. It's always a good, it's fun to bring some wild meat. But yeah, thanks for the sausage.
Hey, my pleasure, man. At least I can do it. It's definitely not, I owe you a pack out or I owe you more meat. I'll give you, how about some whitetail? Want some whitetail dough? Is that?
Oh, hey, I don't want to, there's no pressure. I have a pretty full freezer now.
Don't hold me to it.
Yeah. I got a pretty full freezer now, so there's no pressure. But if you do want to ever offload meat, I'll be happy to.
Well, if it's gonna eventually, how about this? I'll hold off until James is old enough to take in some game meat, because that's. I remember coming back to kids for the last couple of minutes here, when was Hudson? Do we have Hudson yet? I'll mess up the timeline. It's far enough back now, but. When Hudson was old enough to start taking in solids, we had a lot of moose in the freezer. I had been on a trip with a couple of buddies, and they each got a moose, and it's like we had 800 pounds of deboned meat from 2 moose. Like no BS, deboned, weighed at the butcher.
Between 2 guys?
3 guys.
3 guys? Wow. Yeah. That's like 2 years of meat at least for you guys.
So we had a bunch of meat, and that's why I may be getting my timeline right of when we got the moose and how much we had left over by the time Hudson was old enough to be eating some solids. And there was a span there where we'd blend it up. It would be like moose, spinach, and like yams. I mean, it's like a Popeye meal, right? And he would just devour it. And I remember just like such a crazy amount of pride in seeing this young child take in what is just, you couldn't give them better food as a whole, right? So I'll hold off until James is ready to get some of that. How about that?
Yeah.
So just I'll write you an IOU.
Deal.
But what do you got planned for the rest of the season? It's not done yet, man.
Yeah, no. I mean, I won't go into too much detail, but I was actually out yesterday. Telling all these stories in such a short amount of time makes it seem like I've been hunting the whole time, right? But I've actually, James has been a lot of work, and obviously Bree's at home and doing a great job, and it's a ton of work for her. I've been at work. I managed to get out for a couple day trips. I went out yesterday, managed to get my buddy Kyle his first buck, and I shouldn't say, helped him get it. I mean, it was his spot. He did the scouting. Nice. I was essentially there as like a second pair of eyes. And I think that helps because, well, obviously we know why that helps. So we go out there, made it, a bit of a hike in, got pretty high up in elevation, saw a bunch of does, went to kind of the spot that he had scouted out, hiked a little bit, maybe a little further than he did being solo. And I think that helps having another person there. So we get up there and we spot this muley buck. It was a nice 2-point solid body. And, we ended up spotting him bedded down. He kind of put his pack down to get some water, and I came up over the ridge, and it was just a chance. I just saw this head turn, and I saw the half circle of the antler, and I'm like, holy shit. And there's just a bunch of trees. So you could just see through all these trees just barely. And it was about 100 yards away, and I'm like, Kyle, there's a buck right there. So I pulled him back, and he's looking, and he couldn't see it. I just set my pack down, and I just said, just set up your shot. Even if you don't see it yet, you'll see it soon. Sure enough, it moved its head again, and he was on it. And we ended up waiting for 40 minutes. It was bedded down with its ass towards us. So we couldn't shoot it bedded down. He had a decent neck shot, but we decided not to take that.
Sure.
I said, we have all the time in the world. It's noon. Sunshine, and that buck was having a great day. I kind of feel bad for ruining it. He had the wind going down the mountain, and he was looking down the mountain. So he was in the textbook muley spot. And we sat there for 40 minutes. He had him in his crosshairs for 40 minutes.
Wow.
And then we said, when he gets up, he's going to go 3 ways, because he knows we're here. He's looked at us a few times. He's not too concerned. The wind's not going to him, so I don't think he knows what we are. If he gets up and goes north or south, we got broadside shots. If he goes over the back, we'll let him go, and then we'll catch up with him 20 minutes after.
Yeah.
Sure enough, he gets up. He does the stretch, stretches out his back legs, takes 2 steps to the right, boom. And I had the whole thing recorded. So we'll do our own episode on that. I'll get Kyle in and interview him.
Nice.
And, and then, it was his first time skinning out the deer. We quartered it all.
That's awesome.
And helped him pack it out. And it was perfect. It wasn't to the point where it destroyed us physically.
Yeah.
But it was still enough where we finally got to the truck, and we both fell down and just trying to catch our breath, right? Because it was a lot of dead fall, and even though it was only 2K, it was just it was just a crappy 2K.
Well, it doesn't take. It's not the distance a lot of the time, right?
Yeah.
It's the
you're going down.
It's the steepness. It's the the deadfall blowdown type stuff, right?
Yeah.
It can. I've had some pretty easy long hikes that are nothing compared to some shorter hikes that were just absolutely gnarly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it sounds perfect. And I would say, to kind of close the loop, that doesn't sound like ironically, it's the story of a rookie hunter, Kyle.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure you guys are gonna have to do something about the name of that podcast soon, man, because the description you just gave about coaching him through that, and look, we got three scenarios here. We're gonna be fine no matter what, assessing the everything, the environmentals, time of day, yeah, man.
And it's much easier to do that when you're not the one holding the gun.
Fair enough.
So who knows? I don't think he was leaning the same way right from the start. I could tell he was being very calculated, but it is nice having that second voice there that isn't under the pressure to kind of be and I actually have it all recorded. And there's a part there where, we said, let him make the mistake. And we just sat there for another 40 minutes, and he made the mistake. So it was awesome.
Patience, everything. I mean, that's playing it smart, man. That's playing it smart through and through.
And there was points where we were calculating how we could make this bedded down shot. And I'm like, hey, see the line on the back of his quarter there, the back hind quarter. If you put the bullet right just over the top of that, it'll definitely go right through, his
vitals,
basket, right?
Yeah.
But that is counting on a perfect shot. And this is your first shot at a deer. It's 100 yards, but we don't know if
Sure.
that's going to happen.
Oh, absolutely.
So it was great.
It's funny. We don't have the time to get into it. I hinted at it earlier, but this is actually a good example of really good coaching someone on their first deer. The reason I ended up shooting the doe and not Wardo was not, I can't say bad coaching, but definitely some miscommunication and way less time. I mean, it was something needed to happen if it was going to happen. And
which is usually the case.
Usually the case, especially with whitetails. Yeah. He had a shot. I advised him not to take it because from the angle I was at, it didn't look like it was as clear as it could be, right? Kind of to your point, like, yeah, you can make the shot, the next shot, put it bedded down. The deer, this doe was offering a shot, but there was a lot of undergrowth. It wasn't brush, but it was like big undergrowth, like high undergrowth type stuff. And from my angle, looked like he didn't have a shot. And then some stuff happened after that ended up me pulling the trigger. And literally the first thing I did was racked the empty casing out. Looked at Warden and like, dude, I'm sorry, but I thought we weren't gonna put her down and get some meat in the freezer. And admittedly, he and I have been joking that we've been a little bit cursed this year, and so we needed to break the curse, right? And anyways, he was totally cool. He's like, no, right call, because the first shot for him was a good shot. I didn't think it was. I advised him not to take it. And then what happened after that led to me taking the shot, and I'll leave the story essentially at that. But his big takeaway was, you know what, I had a shot. It wasn't obstructed at all from my angle because I was a little bit off to his side. It looked like it was obstructed. And he's like, look, I should have just spoke up and said, no, I got her dead to rights and I'll take this, right? But I mean, it's a good example of that interplay between the newer hunter and the younger hunter. And for us, it was a bit of a breakdown in communication, whereas yours is a great example of playing it really well, playing it really smart, and and taking advantage of the scenario where you had the time to not rush it, right, and not force it. And I think that's a huge lesson and a great outing for Kyle, right? Kyle, a great outing for Kyle. So
yeah, it was great. To your point though, when you're on a hunt and you're away from home, you put in all that gas and money to go there. There's an added level of pressure to like bring something home. Yeah, true. So like, I totally hear where you're coming from with that. Like, as long as somebody gets the whitetail in the truck, that's a win.
Well, and that's how Wardo felt, and it was for him. It was his first opportunity. Like, I led him through breaking the deer down. Like we gutted it out, and then we carried on because we were in a spot where we easily could have seen another whitetail. We had another at least 90 minutes of daylight left. And so, he still got a lot of that experience, right? That of what would have happened if he'd pulled the trigger. Obviously, I've said this to him. I've said this to anybody. I've told the story, non-publicly, and I'll say it publicly. Like, I wanted him to get a deer, and on the elk trip to get an elk more than I wanted one for myself. You and I were talking about this before we keyed up the mics, right? It's legitimately now, in this point in my life, as if not in most cases, more enjoyable to see someone else get something than myself, right? And so, anyways, he's going to get all the meat. He got the field dressing and breaking it down experience, and it was just a fantastic outing, and we've got some great meat out of it.
Yeah, awesome.
Anyways, I got to get rolling here, man. Appreciate the time. Yeah, happy to do another swap cast after quite a hiatus, and well,
we'll go maybe in November. We'll go for a day looking for this whitetail.
Oh yeah, I'm in.
Okay,
I'm in, buddy.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Cheers.
This episode of Rookie Hunter was brought to you by the Wild Sheep Foundation, Sitka Gear, and North Arm Knives. As always, it is hosted by Kelly Mullner and myself, Mike Peterson. It is recorded, edited, and produced at Mountain Stream Audio Productions in beautiful Kelowna, British Columbia. Original music written by the one and only Kelly Mullner with help from Graham Ord, Darcy Booth, and Chip Sleedermean. If you want to help us out, there's one thing you can do. You can go to iTunes or wherever you get your podcast from and leave us a 5-star rating and a review. And don't forget to subscribe. For more on the show, head over to our website, therookiehunter.com.